Hello and welcome back to the next part in my series of videos. It's helping you set up your Synology NAS and DSM-7 completely for the very first time. And today we're going to talk about photography, and I'm going to guide you through how to set up the NAS for the very first time to the best possible way for your photo collection, be it personally or professionally. We're going to be going through a number of different things, and of course we are going to be looking at the Synology Photos application, which again is the Photo Station and Synology Moments merged application for managing all of your photo needs. I'm going to be talking about compatibility in places. I'm going to be talking about how to access collections elsewhere online. I'm going to be pointing you at some resources and guiding you through some of these things, and uploading, sharing, filtering, creating smart albums and more. Before we go any further, for a lot of you, enjoying the media on your NAS isn't something you're going to be doing remotely. You're going to be doing it on the local area network, and when you do allow internet access, you're going to do it in slightly different ways. So before we go into the applications themselves for photography, I need you to go into the settings menu. In the settings menu, let's open it up clear from the start. Go into control panel here, and then at the bottom, go to indexing services. In the indexing services area, you'll have a couple of options which will be quite helpful for how you're going to be able to see the photos on your NAS, at least locally. The first option is for media indexing. It helps to point the system in directions where general files live. As you can see, it affects iTunes Server, Synology Photos, Video Station, Audio Station and Media Server. But do bear in mind that not all of these settings are as set in stone or as applicable as you might think. If you go into the indexing folder, it will allow you to look at where the system is being told general files live. And as you see, videos, /video, music, photo/photo. This means that general access and things like DLNA, Media Streaming, Digital Network Living Alliance, or UPnP, Universal Plug and Play, will access the files in these directories. However, if you're going to be utilizing the Synology Photos application, the choices you make here won't actually affect the application, with Synology Photos being a little bit more rigid about where it can index files. Indexing is when files are regularly scanned by the system and their location, size, date and other metadata information is recorded. So next up we can talk about conversion settings. Now conversion is about the thumbnails more so than anything. Now, thumbnails have always been a bit of a pain in the existence of network attached storage. When accessing files remotely, there's only going to be a finite amount of bandwidth, that is to say, transmission of traffic between your client device, your phone, your laptop, your TV, whatever, and the NAS. And thumbnail generation, which is the creation of these smaller images here before you click on an image and then it gets enlarged, can take up a certain amount of bandwidth. Consequently, a lot of the time people like to change the quality of thumbnails because the lower quality thumbnails will use less bandwidth kind of saturation and therefore leave more traffic possible for the transmission of the files themselves. But some people like to have higher quality thumbnails. Again, you can convert these regularly if you choose on a schedule to make sure that your system is only utilizing the most lean or efficient thumbnails possible, or going all out in high quality thumbnails. These are all very important choices to be made in the early stages of your photo NAS system. But do go through those, and of course there are other ones to do with account privileges and user privileges, which although we've covered them in parts 1 and 2 of this video series, it may be useful to revisit these subjects as it will allow which users can access different services and therefore give everyone the best possible experience of photography on their NAS. The next thing to look at is Media Server. Going into the package center, and then from there going into all packages, and then from all packages selecting multimedia, an option will present itself known as Media Server. Media server is what the NAS utilizes to broadcast and make accessible multimedia over the network. It creates a media server which can then be accessed by lots of different devices around the home, from audio, music devices to video, photos and more, and allows those files to be streamed. Install it and then click open when you're ready. As well as that, there are other tools that we're going to be looking at in future videos with regards to multimedia, as we will have a dedicated audio video coming soon and a dedicated video a media centered presentation as well. And of course we will be looking at Plex Media Server and MB soon as well. But for now, let's make our way into the Media Server application service. The first thing it will ask you to do is select which network internet port, Ethernet port you want to use for your photo streaming. Now this is really important because I say photo, this is going to be the network port used by the entire media server on your network. So if you utilize the NAS for things like surveillance, virtual machines, backups and more, in order to make sure that traffic is evenly distributed, you may wish to select a different Ethernet port and connect that Ethernet port on the back of your NAS, if there's multiple available, to your router or switch, as this will allow a dedicated at least 100 megabytes per second bandwidth to be accessible between other connected devices and the NAS. Alternatively, you can change language defaults, you can change menu styles, and all of this nice and easily, although do bear in mind that a lot of this will be governed by the connected device. Browser settings here will allow you to look at how music is going to be displayed and how photos are going to be displayed, indeed changing their quality if you like in order to maintain network efficiency. Whether you're going to use cover images that come from preset files in the photos or just using default folder values, all accessible there. And again, you can connect other services if you choose, such as internet radio services of course, and you can integrate your video station database into your media server, something we'll talk about in a later video. Finally, DLNA compatibility. Actually, before we do that, don't forget to click save or apply. Go into DLNA compatibility, and from here you can talk about how different audio video types are going to be accessed and whether they're going to be transcoded. Transcoding is the act of changing a file either on the fly or in advance from one version or weight or type into another that's better suited to either the network environment or the destination client device, such as some devices not supporting MKV or FLAC audio files. This allows you to change or enable audio conversion to make sure some files play better the first time around, whether it's to conserve network efficiency or just to change them into a better suited version to the destination device. Again, you can choose different video or audio formats and make sure those are the ones that get converted. And again, there are lots of options here that are centered on more specialized audio files, which are more appropriate to audio users. And again, you can change the settings within the LAN if you choose, or make sure that they cannot be changed via that LAN connection. When you're done, click apply. This brings us neatly onto the subject of Synology Photos. This is their all-encompassing tool with AI-powered facial recognition and geolocational tracking in order to display your photos in the best possible way. There's also an application available for iOS and Android, and although there is a Synology Photos application for the likes of Amazon Fire Stick and more, I believe there are upgrades on that coming soon. Now, in order to make sure the Photo Station can access your photo media, you have to make sure you install the photos in the right location. It's recommended that you go into File Station and go into the Home folder, and within the Home folder, either create an album called Photos, or by the installation of Synology Photos, that album will be created. In that album, you need to, in that folder, you need to add all of the albums that you're going to be utilizing in the Synology Photos application. I've added 5, but in a short while I'm going to add a 6th to guide you through some of these steps. You can also upload photos directly into Synology Photos from the application itself. Simply head up to the plus symbol here, click the plus symbol, and then select an album on your local machine. In my case, I'm going to select this album, which is Berlin 2018, and then click open. From in there, I'm going to select all of those photos, and then you can click open. Although do bear in mind when doing that it will then introduce these photos in a small way and in loose folder form. So for example, if we only upload those 5 and click open, it's now going to upload those photos into a new album, but it's going to be done in a slightly more loose way. And what you really want to do is create a whole new album. So if you go into albums there, you'll be able to see the different ones you've created, such as those recently added, and we can create and add those to a new album, something I'll show you later on. But for my mind, the best way to make sure this system can see your photos is to head back into the DSM interface, open File Station. From there, go into the Photos folder, and then from there, drag and drop the album that you're going to be utilizing over. Drag it into the folder. Let's put that slightly more visibly. Drag and drop it in. Let go. And as you can see now, it's uploading that album, which is around about a 1 GB file size. And I'm going to leave that in the background to do its thing. Now, when looking at the user interface here, you may see that immediately we have some moving images. These are GIFs, and these GIFs are what are being these GIF formats here are accessible and playable via the network here on Synology Photos. You can even find out more information about them, about some of their background information, add them to a slideshow and more. Although it's worth remembering that GIFs have a somewhat more streamlined metadata attached to them. Also from here, we can zoom in if we choose and increase the scale of what we're seeing. But again, zooming on GIFs can be temperamental. Finally, we can share this file if we choose by selecting the share icon. From here, we can create a share link that works on the network, or if we've created remote access to the NAS, if you'd set up your Synology account, then you can utilize that service here as well. You can choose whether only users that have access to the NAS can access it, or anyone on a local area network. You can then choose whether you want there to be a password on this file, which can then restrict its access to only those that have it, or expire the date of it to make sure that it only lasts for a certain period of time. And again, if there are users on the NAS, you can go ahead and select individual groups or users and allow them to either only see the file, add to the file or folder, or download the file at your leisure. Go ahead and click OK. And there you go, we've created our shared file. Now heading back to the user interface there, we can have a little look at some photos that have got a bit more information attached. Let's look at that photo of food earlier on, that nice Christmas buffet layout there. Now, what we can do here is now head into the information section, and not only do we have more information about the location of it being taken, but we can find out a huge amount of information about what camera took the photo, where it was taken, what was the aperture, and more information about this photo. Now, not only is this quite interesting for keen photographers out there, but on top of that, this information can actually be used to create customized and smart albums, as well as create filters later on. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about AI recognition. If we go back to the photos area here, we can see that not only can we see lots and lots of photos, but there's people in those photos. So what we'd like to do is to be able to, get a better collection of those photos of people. And luckily, we have that option. Head into the album section here, and a new tab has appeared called People. This scans through all of the photos using AI recognition to recognize faces. It then combines and creates master lists of those faces all in one place, whereupon we can go ahead and name some of these photos. So, for example, this is Morgan. Click on his name and we add his name. Go ahead, click return, and there you go. Now, all of those photos of Morgan are now tagged with his name. But again, sometimes because people arrive and appear on photos in different ways, their faces can look slightly different between one photo and the next. Consequently, there's some photos, such as this photo of me, which doesn't look the same as this other photo of me, maybe because I've had a haircut or maybe more. Or, for down here, another photo of Morgan, but he's got something obstructing his face. So what we can do is click Who's This, and as soon as we start typing his name, it will offer to merge it with the existing entry. If we click that, we then say that's Morgan and then merge them. Now, all of Morgan's photos have been added together, and what we've got now is more photos with him in them. I can do the same with me and add my name in. Go ahead, add my name, find another selection of photos of me where I look different, such as this one wearing frankly idiotic sunglasses, and then merge those together. Let's go ahead, there's another one of me there, and we can merge them once again. As you can see, we're merging these photos slowly, and now there's more photos of just me on my own, where all of these photos are now. So now 40 photos of me have been taken and all merged together. Now there's lots of things we can do with this, not only because now we can search for people without needing to know the just general understanding of the names of a file, such as the awfully named IMG256 whatever, but now we can search for people by their names. And as you can see, that album we uploaded earlier, it's scanning and adding new people from the Berlin folder that we've just recently added, with that scanning happening in real time there in the background. If we go back out of that Synology Photos area there, we can also see a tag marked places. This takes advantage of geolocational data in the metadata of the photos. And if a lot of your photos have come from photos being taken on mobile phone devices, the majority of modern phones now add metadata linked to the location of photos. Consequently, as you can see, the photos from Berlin that we've uploaded so far have now started to appear here on this listing, as they're all being linked in Berlin. And there you go, some of the photos are already starting to be added with information here where we can look and we can see that the metadata with regards to where the photo was taken and how have now already started to be added. Coming out of this album, we can head back into that main menu there. From the Photos menu, this may not be the most useful view to you, and luckily, if you choose to, you can switch to a folder view, which will then list albums simply by their names, and we can go through and access a folder structure rather than the more graphical one we've seen up to this point. And again, at any point, we can go ahead, select an album, go in, and then choose if we want to share photos in that album, or indeed all photos if we choose. There's lots of options, and we can edit all of the information inside if you choose, download them locally, or add to a brand new album. Such, for example, as this row of photos here at the top. This is a row of photos of bags of crisps from Christmas when they were particularly unusual and I thought worthy of taking a photo. That's right, I'm a super exciting person. We've taken those photos, and from here we can choose to do a number of things. We can add to a brand new album, call this album Crisps, click OK, and now we've created our new Crisps album. There you go, we've got that accessible to us. On top of that, there's our Smart album there. We can choose to rename that album or share the album in the exact same way that we saw earlier. But there are even better ways to create customized albums. You may have noticed while we looked at these options here that at the top right a few extra buttons have appeared. We can change thumbnail sizes and make them bigger or smaller depending on how we want to see them. We can create that new folder where we create a new album or folder to be structured and looked through. We can sort these in different variables if we so choose, but then we have changing to a timeline view that we saw earlier and the filter. Now this is where a lot of the information we've looked at so far comes into bearing. We can choose, for example, to change the viewpoint we have here by selecting that we only want to see photos. We can choose that we only want to see photos from 2015, 2000. Let's go through and add several years and allow that we're going to see all photos except for 2020. We can then say that we only want to see photos that have got Morgan and me in them, and only photos in the UK. But as you can see, the albums have already started filtering down quite significantly there and allow us to make sure that these photos have at least those people in rather than just those people in. And there you go. These are the photos that either have me or Morgan, or filtered down allow us to see all of this all in one place. So again, that filter can be quite useful. But another thing that the filtration of that information can do is if we head into the albums. In the album section, head up to the plus symbol here. From here, we can select photos to create an album manually, which again, we can do quite easily. Go into individual albums and then select photos one by one and create an album for us there. And again, we can filter them a little bit to go all the way through. But where things get really interesting is if we want to make an album but create a conditional album. Now, a conditional album utilizes a lot of the information we've seen before. So for example, let's call this one R and M. This is going to be a personal folder. We can then select the location if we choose. So we can store it within one of these pre-existing albums. So let's go ahead and stick it inside Berlin for the hell of it. From there, we're going to say it's just photos. We're not going to add a date, but what we're going to do is make sure that this album only utilizes certain things. So for example, we can go ahead and add Robbie. And this album now has to contain me. We can also make sure that it only contains Morgan. We click OK. And now it's creating our conditional album. This conditional album will pull the information that we've got so far. Just give it a moment to cycle through and create with the extra metadata as it scans the database. As you can see, it started populating this album with photos of me or Morgan, which is always going to be helpful if we're looking for an album that has certain people in it. Now remember, at any time if we choose, we can just go straight to the top here and just search for people at any time. So again, there we go. We find Robbie, we find Morgan. Now if we type them in loose, it will find them in a very poor way, as it will only find photos that have both of those people rather than optional ones. It is recommended if you're searching for people that you let the system highlight them as you go through, and you'll get a better scope of results all the way through. The last thing we should talk about is the shared space facility of Synology Photos on the NAS. This is when you want to create two parallel areas of photography on your NAS. One for your personal collections and another for collections that you're going to share, either socially or professionally. As you can see, if photos have been shared with you, links will appear here. But any photo that we've shared, such as the GIF from earlier, will appear in this shared section, in the shared space. And again, we can change and edit the rules on a shared file if we choose. And remember, we can go ahead and share albums just as quickly if we choose. If we click share, we create a new shareable link, click OK. And if we go into the sharing section, you can see that our new Crisps album has been added. And remember, we can search and filter through these just as easily by using a lot of that geolocational information. And again, lots of that stuff can be accessed and gone into more detail on the filters here, so it's going into lens information, adding more, add more, and then all of a sudden you have a fantastically comprehensive filter function there that allows you to break down what devices took the photo and in what picture quality. And again, once you've found a photo that you quite like, such as if I go for photos of Morgan there, we can go ahead and then share those photos as we see fit. And again, we can share whole timeline photos, click share, click OK, and there you go. And again, we don't have to do it that way. We can go ahead if we choose to create our new album if we choose. And again, we can create a new one on top of crisp, and it will be added to those lists of options. It's that straightforward and that responsive. And in the shared area here, we can edit what we're sharing and how on the fly, very easily, changing the rules and conditions as we see fit. And of course, if you go to the top here, you can go into the settings menu, which will reveal a few extra features and setup options for Synology Photos, such as adding a photo of yourself if you're using it, naming your account, time zones and more, as well as how you want things to be displayed by default. What happens if there's identical photos? Now, if your Synology Photos is not displaying the people album, chances are you're going to need to go into the settings menu and enable it for the first time here, as it does utilize more system resources when it's indexing, and therefore some NASs disable this option by default. And of course, if at any point you're worried that it hasn't added new photos, even though photos will be scanned as soon as they're updated and uploaded to that album, you can re-index immediately here. Of course, there are other options, such as configuring the shared space, and this is going to be your professional shared space, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And finally, you can talk about if you're going to be using general system-wide settings that affect all users. But for now, let's enable our shared space. In the shared space, we can change who's got access to it and how. We can enable whether we want the shared space to have a facial recognized album. We can also choose whether guests who have got access to the shared space, so if you are a professional photographer, perhaps a wedding photographer, you can allow whether the users that you give links to will be able to edit any of the photos or not. Finally, indexing will happen automatically, but once again you can action indexing at any time. Click OK, and now when you go back to the photo section, a new option will appear here at the top of the screen, where you can flick between the user interface of your personal collection and, by clicking down, the shared space. And the shared space will start resyncing and re-indexing all of the photos that we've seen so far. And just remember, when using the shared space, to go into, if you're filtering or searching albums, to click that cog and add any extra settings that you're going to need. And all the way along, as the system indexes our new file collection, all of that information will become clear, with all of the exact same options for filtering between folders, filtering between the timeline view, adding conditional albums, uploading albums, with all of the options and setup stuff that we've done so far, all readily accessible to you. And that includes sharing too. The albums will be displayed here, and all of the sharing options will be tailored accordingly compared to the shared space or the personal space. Just remember that in the shared space, when you're looking at a photo that you want to share, as right now photos are being indexed so it makes it tough to share, if we find a photo here, the sharing of options in the sharing of a photo in the shared space, if we go into the sharing option, will be exactly the same. Although do bear in mind the invitee list and connections to remote access, once you set up remote level access to the NAS with the Synology account, may be slightly different. But for now, that has been how to set up Synology Photos on your NAS for the very first time. Do remember that Synology Photos is constantly evolving, and although it does lack still at this time of recording a few of the features people quite liked that were available, such as thing recognition and subject recognition that was available in Synology Moments, there's hope that that will be added soon and it will be available here. Also remember that Synology Photos has updated the supported codecs in recent months with what it can support, and with some that weren't available at the launch of Synology Photos, new ones have been added, and therefore these new file formats and indeed long-standing RAW file formats will now be supported. So do stay on top of the Synology Photos page over on the official Synology database to see what new features have been added over time. Finally, if you're moving away from services such as Google Photos, then it's recommended to move those photos over as easy as possible to utilize Google Takeout. Google Takeout will allow you, if you head over to googletakeout.com or do google.com/takeout, log in to your Google account that is registered with your Google Photos account, scroll down until you find the Google Photos application, and then it will allow you to download those photos onto your local machine via an email link, which you can then upload onto the Synology NAS. But do make sure that you download the JSON files, known as JSON files, as these are the files that you're going to need in order to maintain that metadata. For those that need it, I have created both a step-by-step guide and a detailed article listing how to move photos from your Google Photos account and Google Drive over to your Synology NAS. Bear in mind, again, that you will need to maintain that JSON data, which is linked into, when you go in, a selection of files. If we go in, let's find the JSONs here. The JSON is that metadata that you need to make sure you keep as you move the data over to your Synology NAS. And I will go into a lot of detail on this article and the video I've looked at before. So if you need to move data over from your Google Photos account, do take advantage of this guide, which I'll try to link to in the description. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching to today's walkthrough guide for using and enjoying photography on your Synology NAS. Soon we'll be looking at audio and we'll also be looking at video, so stay tuned for those videos. If you've enjoyed this, click like, as it helps me understand what I'm doing right and makes every video better than the last. And of course, click subscribe and the bell to be notified as more parts in this series go live. And take advantage of the free advice section over on NAS Compares, linked in the description. It's manned by two guys, me and Eddie, and we answer every email. We're two humans. Just give us an extra day or so sometimes because it can get busy. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.